I did. I did. But Elvis was, he felt he was okay.
Elvis Presley and Priscilla looked like the perfect couple to the outside world. She was beautiful like a porcelain doll, and he was the untouchable king of rock and roll. But behind all the glamour and camera flashes, there was a much darker story. She was only 14 years old when they first met. By the time they got married, she was 21 and had been carefully shaped into the person he wanted her to be. Their marriage was more like a performance than a real relationship. Now at 80 years old, Priscilla is finally telling the truth about what really made her leave the king of rock and roll. Elvis's early life. Before Elvis became famous, before Graceland and the fancy suits, he was just a shy boy from Mississippi who loved music. He was born on January 8, 1935, in Tupelo, Mississippi. His parents were Gladys Love and Vernon Presley. Elvis had a twin brother named Jesse, but sadly, Jesse was stillborn. This loss affected the family deeply throughout Elvis's life. Elvis was very close to both his parents, but his relationship with his mother Gladys was especially strong. She became the most important person in his world, and he became hers. The family was very poor and struggled to get by. Vernon worked different odd jobs, and sometimes they needed help from the government to buy food. When Elvis was just 3 years old, things got even worse. His father Vernon was sent to jail for 8 months because he had forged a check. The family lost their home and had to move. From the very beginning, life was about survival for the Presley family. Music came into Elvis's life early. The family went to an Assembly of God church where Elvis first heard gospel music. This type of music would later become a big part of his own style. When he started first grade in 1941, his teachers thought he was just an average student. But something special was already stirring inside him. At age 10, Elvis got on stage for the first time at a local fair. He sang a song called Old Shep and came in 5th place. He later remembered being very shy and nervous, but he also felt something inside him that wanted more. That same year, he got his first guitar as a birthday present. He didn't take formal lessons. Instead, he learned by watching his uncles and the pastor at church. Elvis once said he never felt comfortable singing in public because he was too shy, but he kept practicing anyway. In 1946, he moved to a new school for 6th grade. He started bringing his guitar to school and performing. The other kids made fun of him. They called him trashy and said he played hillbilly music, but Elvis kept playing. He was obsessed with a local radio show. The host's younger brother was in Elvis's class and said Elvis was absolutely crazy about music. The radio host noticed Elvis and taught him some guitar chords. He even let Elvis perform on the radio show twice. Elvis was so nervous during his first performance that he could barely move, but he came back the next week and sang again. In 1948, the family moved to Memphis, Tennessee. Elvis went to a new high school called L.C. Humes. He wasn't popular at school. In 8th grade, he got a C in music class. His teacher even told him he couldn't sing. So the next day, Elvis brought his guitar to class and sang a song to prove her wrong. Even though he proved his teacher wrong, Elvis still stayed quiet at school. Some classmates teased him and called him a mama's boy. He rarely sang in public, but at home, he was completely obsessed with music. By 1950, he started practicing more seriously with neighbors and local boys who would later help create rockabilly music. By his junior year of high school, Elvis started to stand out. It wasn't just because of his music, but also because of how he looked. He grew sideburns, slicked bay, eke his hair, and wore flashy clothes that he admired on the famous Beale Street in Memphis. He started dressing like he owned the place. In 1953, at his high school's annual show, Elvis finally had his big moment. He sang "Till I Waltz Again With You," and the crowd was amazed. Nobody had known he could sing so well. Elvis once said he had never been popular in school and had even failed music class. But after that performance, everything changed. The applause opened a door that he had been trying to get through for years. The start of his career. Elvis never learned to read music. He played everything by ear and spent time in record stores just listening to different sounds. He loved country music singers like Hank Snow, Roy Acuff, and Ernest Tubb. His slow, emotional singing style was inspired by gospel singer Jake Hess. Elvis often went to all-night gospel concerts downtown, where he absorbed all kinds of music. Elvis didn't limit himself to just country or gospel music. He also listened to a Memphis radio station that was one of the first to play music by black artists. He listened to blues, spirituals, and rhythm and blues music. This music was raw and emotional, and it stirred something deep inside him. While Elvis might have only been allowed into certain blues clubs on special nights for white people, he soaked up the sound from the streets and radio. Local black musicians like Arthur Crudup and Rufus Thomas made a deep impression on him. You could hear their influence in Elvis's music when he started recording. This mixing of different types of music would later cause controversy, but for Elvis, it was never about stealing. It was about becoming something new. By the time Elvis graduated from high school in June 1953, one thing was clear. Music wasn't just something he enjoyed doing. It was his only plan for the future. In August 1953, Elvis walked into the Memphis Recording Service, a small studio run by Sam Phillips. He wasn't there chasing fame, just a shy teenager who wanted to record two inks. He said it was a birthday gift for his mother, but others thought he just wanted to hear himself on a record. The choice to go to Sun Records said something important about his dreams. The first recordings didn't lead anywhere. Elvis failed auditions and got turned down by bands, but Sam Phillips remembered his voice. On July 5, 1954, something magical finally happened. Elvis was with guitarist Scotty Moore and bass player Bill Black at the end of a boring recording session when Elvis started singing Arthur Crudup's "That's All Right." It wasn't planned. It was raw, electric, and alive. Phillips recorded it, and just like that, he had found what he was looking for, a white singer who could channel the soul of black music. When a Memphis DJ played the song on the radio, the phone lines exploded with calls. Listeners were convinced Elvis was black. The DJ had to ask Elvis what high school he went to on the air, which was coded proof that he was white. 3 days later, they recorded "Blue Moon of Kentucky" with a juke joint twist, and rockabilly music was born. By late 1954, Elvis and his band were playing anywhere that would have them. They bombed at the Grand Ole Opry, but were successful at the Louisiana Hayride. Elvis was awkward at first, but then came the swagger, the hip movements, and the screaming fans. Teenagers couldn't get enough of him. By 1955, they added a drummer, signed with manager Colonel Tom Parker, and toured constantly. Radio stations weren't sure what to do with Elvis. He sounded too black for country music and too country for rhythm and blues. But fans didn't care. He was called the Hillbilly Cat and the Memphis Flash. By the end of the year, RCA Records had bought his contract for $40,000. He was only 20 years old. In January 1956, RCA released Heartbreak Hotel. The song was dark, strange, and unstoppable. Elvis appeared on TV, his first album, and started a cultural fire. He wasn't just polishing black music for white audiences. He was reshaping it completely. His debut album hit #1. Blue Suede Shoes became an anthem. Then came Hound Dog and his famous TV appearance on The Milton Berle Show. There was no guitar, just Elvis in a spotlight. He slowed down the beat, worked the crowd, and moved like nothing America had seen before. Headlines screamed about his performance, the press was shocked, and teenage girls were obsessed. By the end of 1956, Elvis wasn't just successful. He was inevitable. What started in a tiny Memphis studio had become a cultural earthquake. Elvis Presley had arrived, and music would never sound the same again. Elvis and Romance. Despite all his musical success, Elvis was less successful when it came to relationships. He had undeniable magnetism, and women definitely noticed. With his fame, charm, smooth voice, and hypnotic moves, he had it all. This led to a long trail of lovers, flings, and heartbreaks that lasted for decades. In the 1950s, actress Rita Moreno got involved with Elvis. But it wasn't about love. She was actually obsessed with Marlon Brando and thought dating Elvis would get Brando's attention. It worked, but she found Elvis dull, and the relationship quickly fizzled out. June Juanico was different. She met Elvis in 1955, and for a brief moment, it felt real. She wasn't some Hollywood trophy, but a grounded person who reminded him of where he came from. However, Colonel Tom Parker had no room for true love in Elvis's schedule. He wanted Elvis to stay single and marketable, surrounded by starlets instead of small-town girls. The pressure became too much, and June eventually walked away. Then came Natalie Wood, which seemed like a perfect Hollywood romance. Young movie star meets rising rock god. But the reality was far from glamorous. Wood had never seen anything like Elvis's relationship with his mother, and it made her uncomfortable. One night, she watched as Elvis was called over to sit on his mother's lap like a little boy. That was enough for Natalie, and she left. Anita Wood lasted longer, 5 years. She was a TV personality when Elvis spotted her and brought her into his world. But even she couldn't compete with what came next. The moment Priscilla entered the picture, Anita knew it was over. She didn't fight or beg. She simply stepped aside and let go. Priscilla enters the story. Then came Priscilla, the most important name in Elvis's love story. Their romance began under very controversial circumstances. He was 24, and she was only 14. He was a superstar stationed in Germany with the army, and she was a teenager. What started as quiet visits became a secret relationship. Priscilla Ann Wagner was born on May 24, 1945 at Brooklyn Naval Hospital. Her life began with tragedy. Just 5 months after her birth, her father, a Navy pilot, died in a plane crash. Her mother eventually remarried, and Priscilla took her stepfather's last name, becoming Priscilla Beaulieu. Military life kept the family constantly moving. Connecticut, New Mexico, Maine, and Texas. A new home every few years meant new schools, new friends, and repeated goodbyes. Priscilla saw herself as pretty but uncertain, never quite settled, always feeling out of place. In 1956, the family moved to Del Valle, Texas. Priscilla tried to settle in, but soon came another transfer, this time to West Germany. She was devastated. New country, new language, new faces, no roots. But it was there in Bad Nauheim that everything changed. On September 13, 1959, at a party in a rented villa, 14-year-old Priscilla walked into a room and caught the attention of Elvis Presley, then 24 and already a global sensation. Something about her affected him deeply. She made him awkward and nervous, emotions that were rare for a man so used to being the center of attention. But he quickly recovered, turned on his famous charm, and by the end of the night, he was completely taken with her. Priscilla's parents were furious when she came home late that night. They forbade her from seeing Elvis again. But Elvis wasn't giving up. He made serious promises that he would be respectful, follow their rules, and be a gentleman. Eventually, they gave in, and Priscilla was pulled into a world no teenage girl could have imagined. For the next 6 months, their relationship grew in secret, quiet, intense, and deeply romantic. But in March 1960, Elvis left Germany, taking Priscilla's heart with him. Back in America, rumors swirled about Elvis with other women like Nancy Sinatra and Anita Wood. Priscilla felt forgotten and thrown away. But then came letters and phone calls. In the summer of 1962, the invitation that changed everything arrived. Come visit him in Los Angeles. Her parents only agreed under strict conditions: daily letters home, adult supervision at all times, and a first-class round-trip ticket. Elvis agreed to everything. What her parents didn't know was that the letters they received were written in advance and mailed by Elvis's staff while Priscilla was swept away to Las Vegas. That trip to Vegas shattered any remaining innocence. She was introduced to the chaos of Elvis's real world: pills to stay awake, pills to sleep, all-night parties, crazy schedules, and flashing lights. Here was a man constantly burning himself out. Still, she kept coming back. Christmas visits followed, then another trip, and by spring 1963, she was moving to Memphis. She wasn't even 18 yet. Her parents only agreed to the move under one major condition: Elvis had to promise he would marry her someday. She was supposed to live with Elvis's father and stepmother a few streets away from Graceland and finish high school at a Catholic girls' school. Elvis agreed, but gradually the boundaries started to blur. Priscilla began sleeping at Graceland. Her belongings moved in. Quietly, without much ceremony, she became part of the Presley household. The marriage and its problems. Priscilla began to dream of Hollywood, of having her own voice and her own life. But Elvis was firm. She was to stay in Memphis. He was too busy, he claimed. It wasn't the right time. Meanwhile, the tabloids had no trouble tracking him. Photos of Elvis with his movie co-stars were splashed everywhere. When Priscilla confronted him, he dismissed it as just publicity to promote his movies. But this became a pattern. New co-stars, new rumors, same denials. Priscilla kept quiet, not because she believed him, but because she feared what would happen if she challenged him. Then, in December 1966, came the engagement ring. To some, it looked romantic. To others, it seemed more like damage control, pressure from his record company, concern over his public image, maybe even contract requirements kicking in. But regardless of the reason, she said yes. Their wedding took place on May 1, 1967, at the Aladdin Hotel in Las Vegas. It lasted only 8 minutes. There was a press conference, an expensive breakfast reception, and a room full of business associates. Most of Elvis's closest friends were left off the guest list, creating resentments that never healed. They honeymooned in Palm Springs, then escaped to their private ranch in Mississippi. Just the two of them. No staff, no media, no chaos. For 3 weeks, they played house in peace. It was the happiest Priscilla had ever been. She would later call those days a fantasy. Back in Memphis, they threw a second reception at Graceland for those who had been excluded from the Vegas wedding. There were smiles, photos, and celebration. But underneath it all, the cracks had already started to show. Soon after, Priscilla discovered she was pregnant. She wasn't ready, not because she didn't want a baby, but because she feared what it might take away. They had just begun to find something intimate and close again. She had asked Elvis about birth control before, but he had dismissed it, saying it wasn't safe. For a brief moment, they even considered abortion, but in the end, they both knew they couldn't go through with it. 9 months to the day after their wedding, on February 1, 1968, Lisa Marie Presley was born. To the world, they were perfect. The king, his queen, and their beautiful daughter. But inside the gates of Graceland, the illusion was cracking wide open. Elvis was spiraling deeper into pill addiction and paranoia. Priscilla was left to raise Lisa Marie mostly on her own. Hollywood kept calling Elvis, and so did temptation. The affairs were no longer rumors. They were fact, and she stopped pretending not to know. But Priscilla had changed too. She was no longer just Elvis's girl. She was a wife, a mother, and slowly a woman waking up to a painful truth. She had spent years trying to fit inside someone else's dream. The fairy tale had always had shadows, but now those shadows were deeper, darker, and impossible to ignore. The end of the marriage. She tried to hold on at first, but the damage had already been done. The pills, the constant affairs, the broken trust, it all wore her down. What finally ended everything was the complete breakdown of trust. In February 1972, following her own affair with her karate instructor Mike Stone, Priscilla told Elvis she was leaving the marriage. The relationship with Stone hadn't come from nowhere. It was born from years of betrayal. Elvis hadn't been faithful either. Speaking years later on an Australian news program, Priscilla revealed, he wasn't faithful. Not that he had someone special, but when you're in the entertainment business, there is always that. And I tried to turn my back on that, but I just didn't want to share him. Simple as that. The breakup hit Elvis hard. His longtime friend and songwriter Mae Boren Axton told people that it wasn't just his pride that was hurt. It wounded him deeply. It hurt both his ego and his heart. The divorce was finalized on August 15, 1972. As part of the settlement, Priscilla received $1.7 million plus $8,000 per month in support for 10 years. Yet despite the end of their marriage, the connection between them didn't fade. In many ways, it remained just as strong. Charlie Hodge, Elvis's vocal coach and close friend, told People magazine that even after the split, they were like two high school kids. He described how they would still call each other constantly, sharing updates, making each other laugh, and confiding in each other about everything. The romance may have ended, but their bond, messy, complicated, but real, never truly disappeared. Elvis's final years and death. As the years wore on, the same magnetic man Priscilla had once fallen for began to fade. Behind the sequins and spotlight, Elvis was crumbling. He had survived the divorce, but he couldn't survive himself. About 47 years ago, millions of fans around the world were shocked by devastating news. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, was dead. he was only 42 years old. Not the sleek, hip-swinging heartthrob who had once made teenage girls scream, but a bloated, exhausted version of the man he used to be. It was his girlfriend Ginger Alden who found him face down on the bathroom floor of his Graceland mansion. The once golden boy of Memphis had died alone. Paramedics rushed him to Baptist Memorial Hospital, but there was nothing they could do. At 3:30 p.m., Elvis Aaron Presley was officially pronounced dead. Back at Graceland, the bathroom medicine cabinet told its own story. Dozens of prescription bottles filled with pills for everything: pain, sleep, stress, energy, in doses no responsible doctor would prescribe. But Elvis hadn't been living in reality for years, and neither had the people around him. Later that evening, a team of doctors performed the autopsy. But when they faced the press, only one doctor spoke up. Without waiting for agreement from the others, he announced that Elvis had died from heart rhythm problems. No mention of drugs, no scandal. It was a lie. The truth was much uglier, but Elvis's family had begged for a cover-up to protect what was left of his image. Weeks later, the toxicology report revealed the truth. Elvis's blood contained a dangerous mixture of powerful drugs, pain medications, sleeping pills, and other substances. His body was a ticking time bomb. The autopsy also found other health problems: severe constipation, diabetes, and glaucoma. Elvis wasn't just sick, he was falling apart. The way Elvis died was shockingly ordinary. He had been on the toilet, straining to have a bowel movement when the pressure triggered a heart attack. That's how the king of rock and roll died. Collapsed on the bathroom floor, alone, with pills in his system. The constipation wasn't just an unfortunate side effect. It was chronic and dangerous, brought on by years of painkiller abuse. The pills might have numbed his pain, but they also stopped his body from working properly. He took pills to wake up, pills to fall asleep, pills to eat, and others to get through performances. Mixed in were stacks of laxatives, trying to undo what the other drugs had caused. At the center of this medical disaster was Dr. George Nicopolis, known as Dr. Nick. He had been treating Elvis for nearly a decade, supposedly for back pain in the late 1960s, but it quickly turned into something much darker. Dr. Nick became Elvis's main drug supplier. Under oath, he admitted to prescribing thousands of pills and bottles of various medications to Elvis. His defense was that he was trying to keep Elvis from getting drugs from dangerous street dealers. He claimed he cared about Elvis's well-being. Somehow the jury believed him, and Dr. Nick walked free. In 1980, he was charged again for overprescribing drugs, not just to Elvis, but also to Jerry Lee Lewis. Once again, he was found not guilty. But the reckless behavior didn't stop. Years later, the Tennessee Board of Medical Examiners finally took action. In 1995, his medical license was permanently taken away. It was too little, too late. Some people came up with other theories about Elvis's death. A few experts claimed they had tested a lock of his hair and found evidence of a genetic heart condition that could have caused fainting spells, tiredness, and high blood pressure. But when you look at the complete picture, his size, his habits, the drugs, the constant pressure, the terrible diet of fried peanut butter and banana sandwiches, do you really need a rare disease to explain what happened? Elvis wasn't just a victim of bad genetics or bad luck. He was a man who was chewed up and spit out by fame, surrounded by people who wouldn't say no to him, and trapped in a lifestyle that didn't allow room for real help or honesty. Like Michael Jackson and Prince years later, he was another musical icon with a personal doctor who handed out prescriptions like candy until the music stopped forever. In the end, Elvis died not just from a heart attack or drugs or constipation, but from being Elvis, from the weight of who he had to be every single day. He died a lonely man locked inside a mansion that had become his personal prison. The fans who had once screamed his name were left grieving the man they thought they knew, shocked by a truth they never saw coming. Looking back at this tragic story, one has to wonder, did Priscilla make the right choice by walking away when she did? The evidence suggests she did. She saved herself and her daughter from the destructive path that ultimately claimed the king of rock and roll's life.